All right, let's get started. So welcome back to Survey of Economics. So last class, right, we started to really delve into the first kind of real model of economics, right? And so we started talking about demand, right? First of all, we defined markets. And then we went ahead and talked about demand. Right, and we know that we've got price on the y-axis, quantity on the x-axis. We know that demand is a downward sloping curve. This is reflecting the law of demand, right, which is saying that the cheaper something is, the more of it people will consume. So when we're talking about market demand, right, so we all have an individual demand for something, right? So we could think about, this is talking about D individual versus market demand. And so when we're talking about individual demand, right, we're talking about, you know, we could say number of pieces of pizza. It's my good attempt at pizza, pepperonis. So numbers of pizza, and then we have the price of the pizza, right? And this would be like our monthly intake of pizza. We'd have some demand curve like that, right? Where, you know, if the price is, you know, $5, maybe we have 3 pizzas a month. But then if the demand goes up to $10, I'm sorry, if the price goes up to $10, we have a movement along this demand curve. And so now we might only want 2, right? Simple as that. So we each have these individual demand curves. So, you know, this is going to be Beth's. And then we're also going to have John's, right? And maybe John is a little less sensitive to the price. And so John is going to have a demand curve that looks something like this. And so, you know, at $5, John's going to have 5. And at $10, John's going to have 3 or something, right? And so the market demand curve is really nothing more than the summation of all the individual demand curves. So we're just going to use these 2 right now just to kind of prove the point, right? But if I only had John and Beth as my consumers, and let's say that, you know, I was going to price things at $10, how much is my total market demand going to be? Well, at $10, Beth's going to get 2, John's going to get 3. So my total market demand at $10 is what? 5, right? It's this 3 plus this 2 give us that 5. Does that make sense, everybody? So now on your own, calculate what the other point on the curve would be at $5. What's going to be the quantity demanded for the market? If you said 8, you're correct. Why is it 8, Chris? Well, we're taking this 3 pizzas a month that Beth's demanding at $5. And we're adding the 5 from John. 3 plus 5 is 8. Any questions on that? All right, cool. Okay, let's get to the real nitty-gritty of the matter. So at the end of the day, the really interesting thing is those other things, right? That ceteris paribus part that we talked about before, right? So the determinants of shifts in demand. So the first one of these, we talked about it a little bit, right, is consumer tastes. And preferences. So you usually just see this abbreviated as tastes and preferences. And so favorable changes lead to increases in demand, right? What do I mean by increase in demand? Well, I mean that if all of a sudden they say that dark chocolate is good for your heart or something, right? And this is the existing demand curve. And at, $2 or $3 for a bar of dark chocolate, right? There's going to be, let's say there's 1,000, oh, I know I did money sign there. There's 1,000 dark chocolate candy bars demanded in Chadron a month when they're $3 or something, right? So what's going to happen if all of a sudden there's some study, that's widely publicized or whatever, or maybe there's some commercials or whatever, right, that, highlight the study, highlight this perception that dark chocolate is good for you. And so as a result of that, there's going to be a shift outwards in my demand curve. And at that $3, so at that same price, now we're going to have, I did it again, why? 3,000 quantity demanded. So this is a result of tastes and preferences, increase, right? They're improving news regarding the health benefits of dark chocolate specifically. So that's the first one, makes a lot of sense. No big surprise there. Our second one is the number of buyers. And specifically the number of buyers in the market. So this isn't just talking about, population changes. It's also talking about distribution changes. And kind of in these distribution changes, right, kind of inherent in that is, some like international trade, politics kind of stuff going on, right? So the number of buyers in the market, right? And this one again kind of makes more sense, right? If there's more buyers, there's going to be more demand. So at any given price, there's going to be more that the market is going to want, right? More than the economy, the country, the region, whatever is going to want. Any questions on these so far? Cool. All right, what about income? Income. what happens when the income increases, right? So as salaries increase, we expect the demand to increase. Right? We expect the demand to increase, but here's the kicker. If and only if the good and service, right? If the whatever we're looking at is what's called a normal good. What do I mean by normal good, right? Isn't everything a normal good? No. So a normal good is something that essentially it's video games, it's, you know, restaurant meals, it's like, you know, housing, all sorts of different stuff, right? Those are normal goods, right? An inferior good does the opposite of this, right? An inferior good versus normal good, you could think about it like that, right? And the inferior good, essentially, as income increases, the consumption of these goods, inferior goods, decreases, right? So this is going to be, you know, bus passes, ramen noodles, generic brand, anything, that kind of stuff, right? Then we have price of different related goods, right? Leave that up for a second, sorry. Well, let me. All right, the price of related goods. So there's two types of related goods that we can think about. The first one is substitute goods. So these are goods that can be used in place of each other, right? We all know what substitutes are. And so the important thing to keep in mind here is, you know, so substitute goods would be, you know, hot dogs and hamburgers. Coke and Pepsi, et cetera, right? You know, orange juice versus, you know, apple juice or something. And so what happens, so as the price of one of the substitute goods increases, the demand for the other substitute good, right, for the other good increases, shifts to the right. So essentially, right, you know, we react to prices. At a certain point, we're going to go ahead and we're just going to jump to a different product if they try and jack the price up too much, right? What about the other type of goods, right? You told me that there were two types of goods, Chris. What's the other type of goods? The other type of goods is complementary goods. and it's complementary, not complement, like you're so pretty, but complement, if these things go together, complementary goods. So this is, you know, hot dogs and hot dog buns. Meat dog buns. Or shrimp and cocktail sauce. Peanut butter jelly. And again, the important thing to note here is that as the price of one of the complementary goods increases, the demand for the other good shifts to the left. And so if all of a sudden shrimp are really expensive, you can bet your bottom dollar that the market for cocktail sauce would shift in. At any given price, you know, whatever, I don't even know how much a jar of cocktail sauce is, $3 or something. At any given price, there's going to be, you know, 200 rather than the, you know, 2,000 or something like that, right? Because cocktail sauce it just isn't good on anything else. I tried it. I was like a vegetarian for a while. I was trying not to eat shrimp. I really miss shrimp. I miss shrimp and cocktail sauce. You can't put cocktail sauce in anything else and have it taste good. It just doesn't work. So it's perfect complementary good. Questions on that? All right, those are kind of our easy ones. So we have one left. I know there's a lot of them. We have one of them left. And this one is kind of difficult. We're not used to thinking in this way, but given everything that's happened lately, we're more used to thinking in this way. So this one is expectations, right? So the expectations about future prices, but also, right, about future availability. So what did we see happen to the market for toilet paper for no reason? We saw the demand go way out. Because people were afraid of future availability. And then, of course, you know, the hilarious thing about these things is they become self-fulfilling, right? So the more that people panic about it, and the more that people go and stock up, the more that there's pictures of empty shelves of toilet paper, and, you know, and then the more people are going, oh man, maybe I need to go to the store and get extra toilet paper, right? And so it became this whole spiral of activity, right? And so these expectations about future prices and availability tend to have quite a sway over demand. And that's why, you know, you guys have probably heard this quote, you might not know where it's actually attributed, right? But, you know, the biggest, I'm going to do a terrible job paraphrasing now, the greatest fear itself, you know, fear itself, right? The biggest fear we have is fear itself, right? What is FDR talking about, like getting out of the Great Depression, right? And part of that was, he was essentially saying, like, fear has made it so that our demand, our aggregate demand, has shrunk so much that that's why we're in this recession, right? So there's this kind of expectation that nothing's going to get better, and so everybody's saving their money, and since everybody's saving their money, nobody's spending anything, and since nobody's spending anything, nothing's getting better, and so then like that's reinforcing the expectations, and nothing's getting better, right? And so he was trying to like shake us out of this, you know, like this expectation spiral, right? So you know, the only thing to fear itself, FDR, fight, and recession. Wait, depression. Maybe we use a capital D with that? I don't know. Whatever. Depression. Okay. Awesome. So questions on those factors. So we're going to move on to supply so that we can put them all together, talk about equilibrium, and finish out the week strong. Cool. All right, so supply. So supply is telling us what amount will producers or suppliers provide at, you know, any given price, different prices, right? And so, you know, essentially, what we observe that as the price of something increases, the amount that individual people or the market will supply increases as well, right? So if the price of lattes is only 50 cents, right? There's only going to be, you know, one shop in town, and it's going to be like a gas station, right? Selling like, or McDonald's. They sell lattes. They're kind of good. I just get their coffee instead. It's the most consistent, cheap coffee in the world, right? So I'm just like used to their black coffee at this point. But they sell lattes. And then, you know, if they raise the price, right, then, you know, other shops are going to open. There's going to be more. And then if it, you know, gets to the $6 that we see now, then there's going to be even more in terms of quantity of lattes supplied. And so this is just the law of supply, right? That as price increases, you know, the existing firms will ramp up production and sell more product. So, you know, Bean Broker is going to have more hours open, right? If all of a sudden people are paying more for stuff. There's just a direct relationship. The other way to think about it, right, if that's hard, is that there's a direct relationship between price and quantity supplied. As the price increases, quantity supply increases. As the quantity supply increases, it's because the expected price increases. Now, why is this? Well, if the production costs stay the same, if production costs don't change, higher price means greater profit, right? So why wouldn't you? So there's going to be greater production. And just like with demand, with supply, we've got determinants, right, to talk about the shift. So changes in price are just going to have changes in the quantity supplied, right, because they're going to be movements along the curve. But of course, there are things that make the curve hip hop around to the left and to the right. So let's talk about those things real quick. All right, so the determinants of the shift in supply. All right, so the first one is the resource price, right? You'll also see this as factors of production abbreviated all over the place, right? And so this is the cost of the land, labor, capital, and the entrepreneurship. And when we say the cost of entrepreneurship, really what we're talking about there is we're talking about that extra return, right? That extra return, the bonuses that the CEOs and the CTOs and all those people are getting, the extra return that they're getting because of the stock options and stuff like that, right? And so, you know, if talent becomes more expensive, right, then the supply of a particular economy is going to shrink to the left, okay? So if any of these, right, if the cost of any of these, increases, right, then what ends up happening is that supply curve, right, for the market is going to shrink, right? It's going to shift to the left. So essentially at any given price, right, this is just some price, P0, at any given price, there's going to be less stuff that's produced, right? So we used to produce, you know, $3 billion worth of goods, or I shouldn't use dollars. We used to produce 3 billion things, and now we're only producing 1 billion. And so if any of the cost of this stuff increases, then the supply shifts to the left. Now, most of the time, right, you know, you're going to have prompts that say that the cost decreases, right? That, you know, labor becomes cheaper or whatever the case may be. This is often the case when, you know, this is the oil shock example, right? So when oil becomes rare or the price of it increases, then there's going to be this shift leftwards in the supply curve. All right, next. Technology. So essentially how you put the land, labor, capital all together, right? So technological improvement shifts the supply curve to the right. So an example of this would be, you know, what happened in the 1990s and early 2000, right? When as computers kind of hit the scene and all of a sudden the productivity of a lot of these different firms, right, just increased. And so that original supply curve that we had, there was a shift outwards of it to a new supply curve as a result of, you know, increased use of computers, word processing, spreadsheets, all that jazz. And then, of course, you know, at some place we have to include, you know, Uncle Sam, right? You know, so the government, the taxes and subsidies that are put in place by the government will shift to the supply curve, right? And so essentially a tax is a cost. And so that's going to shift the supply leftwards. Whereas a subsidy seen as a benefit. And so we're going to go ahead and shift that bad boy the other way. And to further complicate things, because why not, we also think about the price of related goods when we're talking about the supply curve, right? The shifts of supply curve. And just like before, right, we've got substitutes and complements. So now we have something called a substitute in production. And so substitute in production is just that, right? So if the producer can switch to another good and they see that the other good price has increased, then the demand, or sorry, the supply of that original good will shift to the left. What if it's the price of a complement in production? A complement in production. Well, again, that's just kind of the opposite situation, right? Complement in production means essentially that if the price of the complement increases, the thing that we need in order to produce the good, the supply of that original good is going to go ahead and shift to the left. Questions on these? These are perhaps the weirdest of kind of anything we're going to be going over in this survey class, is the complements in production, substitutes in production. If you can get your head wrapped around these, you're in great shape. So just like with demand, right, we've got expectations, right? If the firms think that the price P future is greater than P now, then what are they going to do? They're going to shift the supply to the left. They're going to hoard that stuff. Oh, glasses. I mean, you're already scratched, but I have to continue to abuse it. Okay. And then lastly, kind of a self-explanatory one, number of sellers. So just like how demand is just adding up all the different individual buyers, the market supply curve is just the individual supply curves of, you know, McDonald's for coffee, of Just Love, of Bean Broker, of, I'm sure I'm missing another one. I mean, we have Starbucks on campus too, right? And so as the number of sellers increases, right? That would be an extra curve that we'd be putting in there, right? So understandably, that would shift this to the right. So the number of sellers is just going to have more product. So at any given price, there's going to be greater quantity. All right, cool. So now that we've kind of covered all that fun ground, let's put it all together. Give you guys a second to finish copying. Cool. All right, so we're going to put all of this together in order to get something called equilibrium. A magical place where everything demanded is provided, right, is sold, and also where everything produced is sold. So what is this really saying? This is saying quantity demanded equal to quantity supplied, right? So it's the price where quantity supplied equals quantity demanded. Everything produced is sold, everything demanded is consumed or sold, or whatever, right? Everything demanded is purchased. Think about it like that. I'm gonna use a different word. So graphically, what does this look like? It looks like this. Price, quantity, downward sloping demand curve, upward sloping supply curve, where they meet, X marks the spot. This is the P star and the Q star. How do I know that that's the price and the quantity that clears the market, Chris? That clears the market. Well, I know that that's the price and quantity that clears the market because I can do some thought experiments if I choose to, and I can say, well, what happens if the price is too high? We have something like P high, right? Well, when the price is too high, if we reflect that high price off the demand curve, we end up with a quantity demanded that's pretty darn low compared to the quantity supplied. And so this extra bit here, what do we call this? A surplus. A surplus, right? We've got too much at that particular price. We are signaling the producers to, open late and produce as much as you can. But at that given price, given what's going on in the market, there's just not enough people that actually care and are purchasing that, right? And so what are the producers going to do? Ultimately, the producers are the people that, they have the control over setting the price, right? The consumers are the one making the decision. There's not a lot of haggling that goes on in modern day consuming, right? There's just the price, take it or leave it. And so these producers, they get to choose the price. They're going to lower the price. Why are they going to lower the price? Why don't they just hold on to that surplus? They're not making any profit, they don't sell it. But I guess they could argue, well, I should wait until the price is that high and then I should sell it. Why would you argue against that? Why are you losing money?
You're paying to keep the lights on in your place, you're paying for rent, you're paying for all that, so you're still losing money.
Very good, yes, so you're still losing money. You're paying to keep the lights on, you're paying for rent, you're paying employees, you're paying storage space, you're paying for maybe security if it's high value items or something, right? If it's perishable, you might want to get rid of it just because it's going to spoil. If it's technology related, you might want to get rid of it because, you know, those things fade out really quickly. Like nobody wants to buy a DVD player, even a Blu-ray player anymore, right? You want a 4K player, or you want whatever, you know what I mean? Like, and so this kind of stuff, it gets updated so quickly. And so if you have a whole warehouse full of DVD players that weren't selling, you know, 10 years ago, and you were like, oh, I'll just wait, you know, blah, blah, blah. Like they're useless now, right? You've been spending all that money, and now you've got to probably pay to like dump them somewhere. You know what I mean? Like maybe you could sell them to, I don't even know, right? Like thrift, it would be hard. Like you could maybe give them to thrift stores or something, but I think it would be really difficult. Maybe developing, but maybe you could sell it internationally. If you had enough of them, you could sell it to some like wholesaler or something, like maybe get 10 cents on your dollar for it, right? But yes, having things in surplus costs you money, and there's a risk that you'll never get anything back, right? And so one of my favorite books, there's an expression in there that's, you know, half a loaf's better than none, right? And so these producers will go ahead and they will lower the price, and then they'll be like, okay, is it good here? And they'll be like, nope, there's still a surplus. All right, fine, we'll lower it even more until they get to the point where that surplus is gone, and everything that's demanded, everything that they're producing gets sold. Now this doesn't happen perfectly in reality, right? But we, you know, it's a tendency, is what we say in economics, right? We tend to kind of vacillate around it. Like there's some surplus, and then what happens? Then there's, you know, they might overcorrect, right? So that's the next point that we're going to talk about. So, you know, you'd say, okay, well, so that lets me know that there's kind of what we would call stability if it's above the price, right? If it's above the price, it's gonna eventually go down to that equilibrium price, right? Because like, what am I trying to prove here? I'm trying to prove that this equilibrium price is this important thing that we should care about, right? Well, why should we care about it? Because that's where the market is going to kind of naturally gravitate towards. And so it gravitates towards it because when there's a surplus, they lower the price. Why does it gravitate towards it when there's a shortage, right? So if the price is too low, and we end up with having something where everybody wants it. There's not that much there, so there's a shortage. So again, what are the producers going to do? Well, if we assume that the production costs are the same for producing at, you know, QS as producing over here at Q equilibrium as producing up here as QD, right? So there's kind of some assumptions in here, right? You know, that doesn't always true out because of the way that kind of firms and costs and stuff like that work, but we'll get to that in more detail when you guys take micro. This is just a survey class, right? We're just trying to get kind of a good understanding of both micro and macro. And so we have these shortages. What's a real shortage that you guys might have experienced in your lifetime? I mean, there's obviously the toilet paper and stuff like that, right? You know, so people would say that what happened was, so how would we model that? Well, we would say that, you know, demand used to be over here for toilet paper, right? Where, you know, it's, I don't know, 50 cents a roll or 0.0253 cents per square inch or something like that, right? I've seen that, you know, Walmart does the breakdown, dollars per square foot or whatever, right? But, you know, it's cheap, you know what I mean? The cost of toilet paper is pretty cheap. And so what ended up happening is, you know, everybody freaked out. There was a shift outwards in demand. Suppliers couldn't adjust that fast. And so as a result, there was a shortage. Why didn't Walmart and the other places just increase the price? Because there are laws that essentially say you can't do that, like in times of crisis, right? It's called price gouging. And so they'll get in trouble for it. So normally what happens in a shortage is they would increase the price, right? You know, until that shortage no longer exists. And we see this right now actually with, I don't know if you guys at all like play video games or whatever, but the Ring Fit. So Nintendo Switches, it's like had such a shift in demand that the original price that it was at $80. It's become so popular that they get sold out immediately. And the only way, unless you're like lucky and kind of like happen to be checking like the subreddit or checking like the Target or Best Buy or whatever website that day, like then the only way to get them is you buy them through like a third-party reseller. So people have been buying them up in bulk because they've been so popular and reselling them at like 120 bucks. And so, you know, yes, there is a shortage in terms of MSRP, right? The kind of the ones that Nintendo themselves are producing and sending out to Target and stuff. But there's enough out there in the market. They just jack the price up. Saw an opportunity, increase the price. They're obviously getting it, and it is a lot of fun. It's probably $60 worth of fun, not $120. I'm not upset. I got it for 80 bucks. I was happy. All right. So an important thing to keep in mind as we're learning about supply and demand and equilibrium and stuff, right, is of course that things jump around, right? So we've already kind of seen some of that, right? I've already been introducing you to that, right? But I just want to be, you know, kind of clear that when we have single shifts, so here, let me draw 4, and then we'll do some single shifts. So when we have some single shifts, then we can understand something about what's going on with the equilibrium, right? So we start out and we label it P star and Q star, right? To let us know that that's our initial equilibrium. And then let's say that, okay, so what do we want this to be the market of? Somebody say a good or service at. Tell that. Anything, could be anything. Grapes. Awesome suggestion. So let's say that there's a new study that shows that grapes are really good for your health, right? And so what's that going to do? That's going to shift demand outwards. And we're going to end up with a new equilibrium quantity and price. What if we were to stay at that same price despite this new demand curve? Well, staying at that same price despite this new demand curve would result in what? A shortage. Because essentially there'd be all of this demand and this much supply at that price. So instead there's a movement along the supply curve, and we end up having an increase in the price, an increase in the quantity as a result. What if we had a study came out and said, we've analyzed all the grapes and, you know, 75% of the grapes in the world have fecal matter in them. Right? So obviously demand is going to shrink for grapes. The old equilibrium price and quantity will be larger than the new equilibrium price and quantity. So we have a decrease in quantity and a decrease in price there. Questions on demand shifts and how that influences the equilibrium price and quantity. You'll have some practice on this with the quiz. And just for clarification, the quiz is I take the best of all of your attempts. So go at it. There's like it's like a set of 200 questions. It pulls 30 from each time. The more you guys, you know, practice and are exposed to the questions and going through the material, the better off you are. If you have any specific problems with anything, or maybe there's something you can't get right or whatever, you know, again, don't get frustrated. Just take a screenshot of it, send it my way.
You take the highest score and don't take the average.
I take the highest score. Take as many times as you want. Yep. Have at it. All right. Now, what about supply, right? What about supply? So we just did the demand shifts. Let's do the supply shifts. So let's stick with grapes. Let's say, you know, it was a banner year, it was a bumper year for grapes, right? And as a result, ton of rainfall. Oh yeah, that's the other thing we didn't talk about. One of the supply things, one of the factors of production is like agriculture and rainfall and stuff, right? Like, sorry, I didn't mention that. So weird. Books are just like slightly different for the survey and the macroeconomics class, you know? And I teach the other one yesterday at the same time, so it's like, wait, what did I tell you guys about? All right, so yeah, so just kind of keep that in mind, like, you know, rainfall, right? If there's a drought, obviously the supply is gonna shrink. If there's really good rain, you know, really great weather conditions, and the supply is going to expand, right? And so, so this is going to result in what? We started out with this equilibrium price, this equilibrium quantity. Now we're going to end up with a lower equilibrium price, but a higher equilibrium quantity, right? So lower price, higher quantity. So the supply curves, they're going to have these kind of mixed bag results, right? The demand shifts is going to be good, good, bad, bad. The supply is going to be bad, good, good, bad. It's going to be kind of mixed in terms of if we see increases always as good and decreases always as bad, right? Which is my Western positivistic penchant, my bent showing. And okay, so lastly, what do we got? We've got what if our supply shifts in? So let's say what if, oh, I mean, this is actually kind of going to be an issue, right? So coronavirus, they like shut down the borders, and essentially like anybody that was here on an H-1B visa or whatever, like we were letting stay, but we weren't letting anybody back in, or we weren't like, they weren't like, even if you had it approved, they weren't letting you in. And so all these farmers were kind of freaking out because they like need all these migrant laborers in order to pick these crops, right? Because you know, no Americans are willing to do it for the wages that, you know, that they're willing to provide given what the market price is, right? You know, so that it's actually profitable for them to do. And so as a result, so let's say that happened. Let's say that there was no migrant laborers, right? No migrant laborers would mean that a bunch of these people would just be like, well, screw it, I'm not gonna do it then. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just like, it's not worth it. I'm not gonna spend all this time to lose money, right? And so there's gonna be a shift inwards in supply as a result of what? That factor of production, specifically labor, becoming more expensive. And we were at this price and this quantity. And now we're going to be at a higher price and a lower quantity. Oh, I should write that down somewhere. Higher price, lower quantity. Got to complete the boxes. So these are single shifts. I know. Let's talk about double shifts and then call it a day. That should cover us in terms of the material we need to know for our quizzes, and then we'll pick up with chapter 4 and elasticity in class on Tuesday. All right. We're gonna do that same thing again. All right. So what if we have a shift outwards in demand and a shift outwards in supply simultaneously? Well, our shift outwards in supply looks like this. Our shift outwards in demand looks like this. We have an old equilibrium price and quantity right here. Our new equilibrium quantity is clear. In terms of the quantity is increased, right? But what has happened to the price? Well, the way that I drew it, it looks like it increases a little bit. But what if I had drawn the shift in supply to be fatter, right? What if I had drawn the shift in demand to be right here instead? Then it would be lower. Then the new equilibrium price would be lower. So we have no idea what happens to price, right? So this, the answer is question mark price, decrease quantity. We don't know. And so this is really the start of us understanding, you know, how all models are toy models in economics, right? That it doesn't matter, you know, how complicated we make the models, right? If we, as soon as we start complicating things, we start to kind of lose information that we get at the end of the day, right? When we had a single shift, we kind of knew what was happening with both price and quantity. Now that we start to have two things happen at the same time, we're starting to lose that kind of, you know, like some of the usefulness, right? Now we're only able to predict that quantity is going to, oh, somebody should have corrected me. Quantity increases, sitting here blabbing. Quantity increases. Increases. So it's useful in that it tells us about something, but it's less useful than before because we have no idea, you know, this could be above, it could be below, we really have no idea. Isn't a little cloud somewhere, we don't know. All right, now, what if we were to have a shift outwards in demand and a shift inwards in supply? What would that look like? Well, a shift outwards in demand would look like this. And a shift inwards in supply would look like this. Our old equilibrium would start out right here. Our new equilibrium, we would know for sure has a higher price. We really don't know what's going on with the quantity, right? It could be lower, it could be higher. So that, again, that Q star star is a little question mark in the cloud. We have no idea. what's going on there. So all we know is we know that the price has increased and that the quantity is ambiguous. Ambiguous. All right, two more and then we're done. Okay, what if we were to have a shift leftwards in the demand, but a shift rightwards in the supply? Ooh, very interesting. So if we were to have a shift rightwards in supply, that look like that. And a shift leftwards in demand would look like this. Our original would be right here. P star, Q star, and our new would be over here. And so we would know for sure that the price decreased. Oh wait, oh, see, I drew this all kind of wrong. No, that's wrong. The way I drew it messed myself up. Okay, so let's redraw this. And see, I drew it, this S, the supply shift is too large compared to the demand shift. And so that's part of what tripped me up. So we're gonna redo this guy right below it. And we'll get back to the third one. We gotta do them exactly the same size. That way we know which one's ambiguous. And then the supply is going to increase. Because when you do it the exact same kind of size, then the one that's ambiguous ends up lining on top of the original. This is my original. And then the new one is right here, right? Which now I can definitely see, okay, it could be there, could be there, right? So I can see that it is actually the quantity that is the thing. And so I was right before, that the price, the original price that we had, the only thing that we know when both of these shifts happen is that the price goes down. We don't know what's happening to the quantity. I was right. It was just not easy to see. And again, it's easy to get confusing if you don't label everything, you know, if you start to rush through it. So just like with word problems in math, the key is to go slowly and try not to make mistakes the first time. Because this is definitely one of those things where, like, when you make a mistake the first time, then you go over it again, your brain just keeps on like making the same mistake. So like, take your time, go slowly, get it right the first time. All right, and last but not least, what if we have a shift leftwards in demand and a shift leftwards in supply? So this is demand. Supply. We've got an original. And we've got a new. We don't know what happens to the price, right? And so this one is a question mark on the price and a decrease on the quantity. Oh, sorry, this one is a decrease on the price, question mark on the quantity. So there it is. Those are the 8 different types of graphs that you really need to know You know, this is going to be a significant part of the midterm and stuff, right? It's the most important model of kind of introductory economics. So again, if anybody's having any trouble, you know, like take the quiz as many times as you want. I took the best score. If you're having trouble on any specific question, take a screenshot of it, send it to me. I'll make a little video recording. I've got a YouTube channel that's got some videos already up there and some classes, and it'll have this class up there too. So if you want to rewatch this class, it'll be on the YouTube channel and up on CSC Online. So yeah, be safe out there. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Tuesday.